The following program contains language and situations of an adult nature. Some material may not be appropriate for young viewers.
So I'm going to talk today about the history of Chinese Americans and the impetus of why they came to the United States. But to really avoid getting into that too much, we first need to start off with colonial America had a colonial court precedent case that survived into the American Constitution post the American Revolution, known as lifetime enslavement. And there were men back then who argued against enslavement, especially lifetime enslavement, as an unjustifiable thing, and it needed to be eliminated. We called those people abolitionists, and they were making a lot of progress prior to the American Civil War in arguing for free labor and labor that people voluntarily chose to do in exchange for money. We call that sort of thing a job these days. But back then, with lifetime enslavement and your children and your progeny being born enslaved into bondage, it was a very hot topic. Now, by the 1840s, we had discovered gold in California, and that meant that there was a lot of labor that needed to be done, and there were a lot of ways to get rich quick. And of course, on the West Coast, being dangerous to even get to, you had an opportunity for people who were poor, who were willing to risk their lives to do dangerous work to get rich quick, and that is just as true today as it was then. Any dangerous job out there, there is somebody out there willing to do it. Now, the journey from the American East Coast to the West Coast was a very treacherous, dangerous, and expensive and long journey. However, sailing a ship from China to the east towards the American West Coast to California was a little bit less expensive, and it was something that was a popular idea. Now, the people of Southeast China at the time were very, very poor. They were willing to do hard labor, backbreaking labor, dangerous labor, and they came to the American West Coast seeking that. As far as who brought them in, I can't really remember recalling who the first ones to come in were, but the Chinese themselves were very industrious. They did a lot of service jobs, and mining was a specialty of theirs. They worked the mines, the gold mines in the West Coast. They were very cheap laborers and very efficient workers. And of course, once the gold mines ended, they started building the Transcontinental Railroad, both the United States and Canada's West Coast. Most of it was built by Chinese descended people. They worked in labor camps, and they often got paid a lot less, were treated a lot worse, mainly because they didn't speak the language. And the other reason was a lot of times we weren't sure that their labor was 100% voluntary. Most Chinese had come to the United States as very rough laborers from Southeast China. It was very poor, and at the time they were part of a dynasty that made them grow their hair very long. They had this hairstyle known as the queue. Eventually that would change. They would start westernizing. They would start becoming Americans and assimilating, at least of the fashions of the time on the American West Coast. There was no denial of that, but there was something that started striking California politicians, particularly was that 1 in 6 Americans in California were of Chinese origin, and that would sour the mood. Eventually, political cartoons of their day would talk about the bad things that Chinese Americans had brought to the country, namely cheap labor. There was also issues with vice such as gambling, prostitution, organized crime, addiction to opium, robberies that were going on in the customs offices, things like that. Now, the reason we don't know 100% about Chinese laborers being 100% voluntarily here is that there were ships that suffered mutinies on bringing workers to the American West Coast, ships that ended up sinking because of that. There were tombs made in Japan for the shipwrecks that came on their shores from those mutinies. And the coolies themselves were often people who were either indebted to some organized crime in China or some other group that forced them into labor into the United States. This got the attention, of course, of the Lincoln administration, who passed the Anti-Coolie Act of 1862. And the other issues, of course, was opium had been brought in by the British to that part of China, and these people had brought their opium addiction with them. They had brought it to the American West Coast. Smoking opium, consuming opium in various ways was very common in the 1860s West Coast of the United States, and we have, of course, all the evidence that shows it. And I'm bringing this up because what happened next was that the country started souring their mood on the presence of Chinese Americans in the country. they started seeing the vice and they started seeing organized crime as a real problem. Because the other things organized crime brought in is because they brought in so many male laborers without their families. These were often guys by themselves that moved to wherever the job was. They started bringing in women that we don't know 100% if they were voluntary all the time or some of them were forced into service. But there was a lot of prostitution going on in the American West Coast, mostly Chinese women. Now, of course, every ethnicity had the ability to become prostitutes back then, and a lot of it was voluntary. But with the Chinese in particular, we weren't 100% sure if it was voluntary because we were starting to hear reports of these women owed debts in China and their families owed debts, and it was their job to pay them off through such a terrible service that it actually brought activists of the day to help end the prostitution trade. In particular, people started arguing against the involuntary movement of women, which we would now call trafficking, the trafficking of women into the West Coast, and eventually this led to the Page Act being signed in 1875 to bar Chinese women from coming into the country. And while at that point 1 in 6 Californians was of Chinese origin, that also scared politicians because in democracy, demographics is destiny, and this was a sizable minority that was going to have future political pull if nothing was done to stop it. So Washington, D.C. in 1882 passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. This was the first immigration act that ever excluded a particular group of people based on their country of origin. Now, this political cartoon from the time is incorrect. Actually, we didn't really deport anybody. We didn't really kick anybody out. What we really did was just build a wall, not a physical wall, but we just stopped the ships from bringing them in. We'd turn them around. We'd say they were not allowed to come into the country. So realistically, this political cartoon is more accurate. The people that were already here were grandfathered in. And there's a strange case, of course, that still has precedent to this day in the American courtroom. And that was a Chinese American had left California to go back to China. He had accumulated enough wealth from working over here that he was able to go back to China. And upon his return, the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed. He was not allowed to enter in. So he actually sued successfully to the American Supreme Court that he was born in the country, and under the provisions of the 14th Amendment, he is a citizen of the United States. That man, of course, was Wong Kim Ark. And that case, still to this day, is the precedent for 14th Amendment, being that if you're born in this country, you're automatically a citizen, otherwise known as anchor babies and things like that. Well, then, of course, this policy of the Chinese Exclusion Act would last up until the 1940s when we decided to go to war with a country that was very similar to us, loved baseball, and was adopting a lot of our cultures, including the culture of expansion. They decided to expand into China, and we said no, and we took the Chinese as we were very sympathetic to the Chinese. So we started eventually helping and aiding China in what became the Second World War. And it presented a major problem for us. You see, we really couldn't tell the difference between the Asiatic races as far as whose country of origins who was from based on their facial features, and so it created a real conundrum for us.
So are you Chinese or Japanese?
I live in California last 20 years, but first come from Laos.
Huh?
Laos. We lay ocean.
The ocean? What ocean?
We are lay ocean. From Laos, stupid. It's a landlocked country in Southeast Asia. It's between Vietnam and Thailand, okay? Population 4.7 million.
So are you Chinese or Japanese?
Ugh.
So the United States government had to produce pamphlets like this one to do a crash course in how to distinguish between Japanese and Chinese facial features and phenotypes. And it was, of course, a very embarrassing thing to look at now. It's kind of interesting to think that we actually had to produce this, but we were mostly against Chinese coming in until we became their best friends in that time frame, and we really couldn't distinguish the two. It was a beyond strange thing to read now and to realize now that this even went on, but it did. In fact, even Chinese Americans themselves got in on it because they would put signs like this on their back to make sure they didn't get attacked domestically, to let everybody know, hey, we're allies of the United States. And this was mostly due to the Ni Hao incident and Japanese Americans intervening on behalf of a downed Japanese pilot. But Chinese Americans, they served overseas. They served in World War II with great distinction. did a great job. Would come back, would open up several different types of businesses. Laundry was one. Now today, these days, they're in every segment of society, rich and poor. You will find them pretty much anywhere. And of course, the thing that we then had an issue with was that China itself, after World War II, would end up falling to the communists. And you could pretty much go to any Chinatown now, and it is a mix of people who've been here forever versus those who are recent arrivals. We started bringing in what is known as the third wave of Chinese immigration after the Chinese Exclusion Act was pretty much repealed. It's no longer a policy. Well, now a lot of Chinese are coming into the country illegally via Mexico, but as far as the achievement of Chinese diaspora from the early days, there's pretty much truth in the United States that you can go to any part of the country and you will find a Chinese American restaurant. Now, this is without a doubt inauthentic food. This is American food. This was dishes made primarily in the United States, like chop suey. And of course, unless you're Andrew Zimmern, you got a problem. You have no problem with this. Americans want inauthentic food. Now, if you ask Andrew Zimmern, he actually thought it would be a great idea to open an authentic Chinese restaurant and insult Chinese Americans by saying the stuff they serve us in the United States is not authentic and it's terrible. So he opened Lucky Cricket. It, of course, didn't do so well, mainly because I think a lot of people were confused that they might be being served crickets. But then after World War II, something terrible happened. We lost China. They fell to the communist influence. They had a cultural revolution. They pretty much started destroying ancient Chinese culture. They did everything they could to subjugate people, and that led to the third wave of Chinese immigration to the United States. And they're still going on to this day where Chinese are coming into the country whichever way possible, whether legal or otherwise. And if you haven't seen this show, Shin Yun, it's pretty much in every city. It is a propaganda show by the anti-communist cult, the Falun Gong. If you've never seen it, I recommend seeing it. I thought it was pretty good propaganda. Now, there's one thing we know is that Chinese love to gamble, and every casino has bent over backwards trying to accommodate Chinese taste and cultural values and cultural arts. So they do it in a lot of slot machines. They do it so much. And I think it's amazing to me that the casinos do this so much, yet the one thing we don't have, the one thing that's disappeared from Chinese American culture is this game known as Fantan. It was everywhere in California. It was everywhere on the American West Coast. And yet today, it is nowhere to be found in Las Vegas. It is nowhere to be found in any Native American casinos in the United States. And I think it should be there. If we're going to try to appeal to the Chinese Americans and Asian Americans in general, we need to bring the game of Fantan back. It's a fascinating game. It used a random number generator of a bunch of beads. You'd have them in a large bowl, and then you'd jumble them up. And in a smaller bowl, you'd open up the large bowl, collect a few with the bowl on a single swipe, and then collect the rest in the larger bowl. Then use a stick to divide by 4 until you came up with the remainder. And I found this picture of when this game was popular, but it was illegal, and the police are busting it. This absolute confusion, this great sense of emotion in this artwork. I loved this piece of art, so I had to show it. And you could just see the utter confusion on this guy's face. It is fascinating. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about this interesting game of Fantan, and it's crazy old game. It's been around since 600 years before Christ was born. And this thing has an interesting random number generator that I've never seen with any other game. In fact, it's played on online casinos because online casinos, well, they like to take risks. They like to have different games. And so here's basically an example of the game. Now, I put the simple board up there. Somebody's bet on the 1. So we're going to have the smaller cup collect a bunch of beads. Now we're going to divide by 4 using this stick. And we got 4 there. We're going to get another 4. And we're going to do this until we can no longer divide by 4. And we're going to get the remainder. And the remainder is what we're looking for. So in this case, the remainder was exactly 1. So whoever placed a 1 bet wins. So let's go ahead and learn how to play Fantan, a game for any number of players. All you need is really the space. Now this is the more complex board. There are a lot of different bets you can bet on Fantan. Even though there's only 4 possible results, you have several different ways. Now this is, of course, like most Asiatic gambling games, a commission game, meaning that you don't get the proper payouts because the casino has to make some money. So example, the best bets of betting a 1, 2, 3, or 4 only pay out 2.85 to 1. So instead of getting a 3-to-1 payout, you're getting a lesser payout so the casino makes some money on it. So let's talk about the Fantan playing board, the betting board. I know it's going to look complicated for your first time seeing this, but it's really not complicated once you get to understand what each position on the board represents. Let's start with the first and most obvious one, the fan. The fan is the most extreme bet that you can make. It has the highest payout and the least possible chances of occurring. It's a 1 in 4 chance, and if we were playing the game fairly, we'd have a payout of 3-to-1. But since we have a commission to pay, which is 15%, we'll be paying about $2.85 to every dollar wagered. And so that's positions 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's determining what the remainder is going to be when we divide the objects by 4, like we talked about earlier in the video. And this is one of those bets that's going to be real easy to make. And this is one of those things where you see we're getting a 2.85 payout to 1. It's going to take a while to chase your losses. The next is a 2 position known as the quack. These have 2 different numbers as primary positions. If either one of them is made, you win. The payout's 95 cents on the dollar, so for every dollar you spend, you get 95 cents back if you win. So you also see that we have odd and even in the middle of the board with 1 plus 3 and the 2 plus 4 being the even. We also have big numbers, which is 3, 4, and small numbers, which is 1, 2. And then 2 nonsensical numbers, which is bet the next corner next to each other, the 1 and 4 and the 2 and 3. Those positions pay about 95 cents on the dollar, so if you win them, you win about 95 cents. Let's move on to the tan. The tan is an interesting bet. It has 2 primary positions and 1 position that pushes. So let's say the top left one, the 1, 2, 4. If 1 or 2 win, you get 95. You get about 47 cents on the dollar. If the 4 is made, then you just get your money back. You get your $1 back. So this would get you about 47 cents for a $1 bet. And that's just the nature of the commission and the nature of these payouts. This game is very likely that you're going to win. The last bet is known as the sh. That's probably not the actual Chinese name, but I'm just saying it as an English speaker, and that's what it sounds like to us. And that's going to be the 4 outside bets. These are going to be 3 primary positions. If any of them win, you win, and you'll win about 31 cents on the dollar, 31 or 32, depending on how the casino feels like paying. So about 31 cents on the dollar if any of those numbers win. So a very good chance, 3 out of 4, that you're going to win, 75% chance of winning. So that's what those payout numbers are. And those are the different types of bets that you can make. And you can also make a bet known as the NIM, which is the last position. I thought I was at the last position earlier. But no, the NIM has 1 position plus a push position. So we're going to look at the greens on the left. We got 2, 1, and 2, 4, and 2, 3. Let's say the number 2 comes up. Well, then you win $1.90 for every dollar that you spent. But let's say the second number comes up. Well, then you get your dollar back. There is a lot of pushes in this game. There's a lot of ways to bet and not take a great deal of risk, which I think was what made Fantan such a popular game in its day. And it's one of those things that because we have digital tables now, we don't have to have dealers. We could probably play this in a digital way, but let's say you want to play this at home. I decided to, instead of buying any identical objects, I said, well, peanut M&Ms work just as well. And so I used a Frisbee as the plate cover, then I used a smaller cover to go ahead and generate random numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and spin them up. Take my little baseball helmet. I found out it didn't really work too well, so I ended up going with something different. Now we're going to divide by 4 physically. So I'm doing 4 at a time, and I'm not making perfectly even stacks, so I could be cheating here, but no, I'm not. I'm making sure each time that I have 4 M&Ms in my stick, I'm left over with 1. So let's see what type of bets would have won if you would have made a 1 bet. I've circled all the winning bets in yellow, and of course the payouts are listed below. For a $1 bet, that's what you would get. And anything that's in blue is a area that's going to push. So if you bet on the area that has a 1 as the secondary, you'll get your dollar back. You will not lose any money. We'll go ahead and do it again. Let's see what happens. We will go ahead and move the M&Ms 4 at a time until we're at the very end and we have but 3 left. That is our remainder is 3. So if you bet on 3, you win. Let's go ahead and do it again. We open it up and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We keep doing it over and over and over again until we have a remaining number. And once we have that remaining number, we have our result. It is a 2. So those who bet the 2 are the odd, or excuse me, the even, they would win. And now we'll go ahead and do it one more time. Actually, we'll just keep going. We'll just keep this up. So those of you playing along at home, make your bets, pause the video, make other bets, and see if you're right or wrong. Okay, so now we got 4. So if you bet on the 4 or the even or the big numbers, you would win. There's several different NIMs that have a 4 as a primary position. Got all kinds of options here. So we'll go ahead and scoop and take 4 out. And we have, let's see, what do we have? What will we have? 4. So if you bet 4, hey, we have a streak on 4. And like all Asiatic games, there will usually be like a bead board that will have Chinese symbols on there telling you what the previous results were. Now we'd have 4 in the row. So we'd have like a vertical column of nothing but 4s over and over and over. So I decided that stick was just too cumbersome. I'm just going to use my hands to determine. Oh, we got another 4. What a streak. Let's go ahead and do it again. Let's see. Go 4, 4, 4. And if those of you at home are wondering that we have 2 left, if I've eaten any of these M&Ms, yes, of course I did. M&Ms are a delicious candy, but I think the plain M&Ms would have been better for this application. Unfortunately, I think the plain M&Ms taste worse than the peanut M&Ms, and so I went with the peanut flavored. That's what I went with my objects. Okay, got another 4. So those of you who've been betting the even have been cleaning up. Those of you betting the odds, well, you've been losing. So let's go ahead and see what happens. And we have 1. Finally an odd number, a small number. So the other thought I had was that Vegas wants to not have so many dealers, and so too do Indian casinos. Why don't we do like a bubble craps version of this? Just put 4 6-sided dice in the machine, have it read it, have it divide by 4, tell us the results, and then do all the other math. There's so much math involved in this game, so much arithmetic of figuring out the commission. The other idea is take a digital craps table and let 4 different players, if you have 4 players, throw the dice all at once to determine the winner. It'll look something like this. Okay, I got, so let's see, 5 plus 4, we got a 9, plus another 4, it's 13, plus another 3, 16. Hey, 16, that's divisible perfectly by 4. 4 times 4, 16, so 4 is the result. So that's one of the ways I can do it. Now, I don't know personally, I haven't done the math, and I'm not good at math. I'm terrible with math and odds and probability and all that. I'm not sure how much of a difference there would be between the dice and the physical objects. I'm thinking that somebody out there, if you're a math student or interested in math, if you could let me know in the comments, I don't care how long it takes, if you're watching this 10 years from now, just go ahead and put in the comments what the actual odds are, if there's any difference between these dice. And I'm going to show you one more method. Okay, so you can't really see it, but the result was 4. I realized that transparent tube where the position of the camera was, it does not give a clear picture on what the dice faces are, but the sum total divided by 4 was 4. So anybody that had a 4 in the bet would either push or win. So I'm going ahead and finding the winners now, and I'm finding the ones that need to be pushed, and I'm removing those that don't win. The other idea I had, what if we did like the Baccarat of just dealing 2 cards to determine what the result was? There's 2 different ways we could do this. We could either go kings and face cards and 10s, whatnot. Those cards being worth 10 points, in this case be 20, which would be a 4. Or it could be both zeros. So if you pull 2 face cards or a face card and a 10, you would just redo it. There we saw a face card and a 2, so that'd be a result of 2. Now we get a 5 and a jack. That results in 5, which is a remainder of 1, because 4 is the closest number that's perfectly divisible by 4. So now we got a 5 and an ace. That's a 6, which means remainder of 2. And now let's see what else we have. We have an ace and a king. That means we got a remainder of 1 if we're doing one method. Otherwise, it'd be an 11 if we're doing the other. An 11, of course, divided by 4, you're looking at a remainder of, what would that be? See, we got 12. It's perfectly divisible. Remainder of 3. So that's one of the things we could do. And I don't know both of those card methods, what the odds are. Here we have a 15, so that's a remainder of 3, because 16 is the next divisible by 4 number. That's 1 away from the previous, so that'd be a remainder of 3. I don't know what the odds are doing it one way or the other. If we have 10s and face cards equal 0 and everything else equal what it is at face value, and then we add them together and divide by 4. I don't really know. Let's see. My bet is 3. Do I win? I got a 7. 7 divided by 4. would be remainder of 3. So yeah, that's a win. So let's go ahead and do the next one. I say, what do I want to bet this time? I'm going to bet on the odds. Odd numbers, so we got queen and 9. So hey, that's going to be a remainder of 1. That is an odd number, so we win there. But since this really can't be played with physical chips because of the nature of the commission, I think it's a perfect game to digitize, and I think every casino out there should be looking into digitizing Fantan, maybe making it a fun game where everybody gets to throw dice at a digital craps table. I think a lot of people who go to the casino, that physical involvement, that idea, that thought, that fantasy in your mind that I have some control over the outcome of this game, such as physically throwing the dice versus having some bubble push them up, I think that would attract people. But if you also want to say, hey, this is a big risk, just recently the Choctaw Casino has gotten rid of 3 dice Baccarat. It's no longer on the website. I have not visited the casino to see if that table is physically gone, but it was only 1 table. And they've already gotten rid of it because nobody played it. It required a dealer. I think if they would have bubble crapped the thing, if they would have done bubble craps type treatment to 3 dice Baccarat, that it could have been a lot more popular. There's something that's just socially awkward with people who don't know table games, that when you're in the casino, you don't want to go up there and ask the dealer how to play. You feel like you might get taken advantage of. I completely understand it, but you'll play a digital version of the game, and there's a lot less to go through with a digital version. I like digital roulette. I don't think I could trust it, but I get the irrational fear that the numbers are being generated in such a way, or sometimes when I play bubble craps, I think it just gives me, it can give me 7s whenever I want. I don't feel like I have any real input on the possible outcome of the roll or how hard I mash the button. I don't know if that affects anything, and I want to rationally say that it knows when I bet a certain way, it's going to go the exact opposite. So if I lay a bet and hope for a 7, it doesn't happen. If I bet on any 7 or hop the 7s, I don't get my 7. So if I play 4 dice digital Fantan, is it going to be able to do the same thing with 4 dice in there, or is it going to be completely random? That's a tough thing, isn't it? Or if I play with a digital card deck and we do 2 like we do with digital Baccarat, can I trust it? Now, I have put big bets on digital Baccarat, at least $100, and I have won on the Baccarat, the digital version. So I don't know. So you tell me in the comments. So, like always, if you like to play this game out in public, and come visit our subreddit card game meetups. Post your city and a public place you'd like to try this. Go ahead and post a public place. You never know. Somebody might go on there and agree to meet you there. And you never know. You have strangers out in the world, but as soon as they introduce themselves, they're just friends you haven't yet met. So come to our Discord channel. We talk about card games, dice games, domino games, all day, every day. It's a fun place where you can interact with a lot of people. So do call up your friends. Let them know you'd like to risk your friendship and illegally gamble. They might say yes, and they might say no, and they might talk your ear off. But you never know what they're going to say unless you call. Do like and subscribe and share these videos with other people you know love playing card games. And do visit our YouTube channel in the community tab. We might have a poll or a question, or I might just write something. You never know what I'm going to do in that area. But anyways, I want to thank today's musicians. I want to thank everybody who subscribed recently. I'm sorry I've been so long since I made a video, but it has been tough. This is a bit longer of a video, a lot more explanation, and a lot more work, and I've been somewhat distracted by other things going on in the world. So I want to thank today's musicians, and I'll see all of you next video.